You ever get the feeling that history's happening right now? Like you're living through something people will study later in school, but no one's really seeing it as it unfolds? That's Ibrahim Traoré. That's what's going on in Burkina Faso. He's 36. He doesn't speak like a diplomat. He doesn't dress like a revolutionary. But he's doing the one thing most leaders in Africa haven't dared to do in decades. Saying no to the West, to the IMF, to the quiet suffocation that comes wrapped in foreign aid and UN press releases. And the scary part? He's not failing. Ibrahim Traoré didn't just lead a coup. He pulled the curtain back. He showed people how rigged the system was, not just in Burkina Faso, but across the whole global south. He made it okay to say out loud what too many already knew deep down, that this partnership with the West is a scam, that so-called sovereignty is rented by the month and priced in CFA francs. This isn't about idolizing some guy in fatigues. It's about what he represents. He's the glitch in their matrix. The system wasn't ready for someone who actually meant independence, who actually believed Africa could run itself. Not just in speeches, but in policy, in gold reserves, in troop deployments, in refusing to shake hands with the same people who bankroll mercenaries burning down villages in the Sahel. You can feel something shifting. He doesn't talk like a savior. He's not giving you the polished charisma of a media-trained president. But what he's doing, cutting ties, reclaiming resources, rejecting foreign military support, that's revolutionary now. Not because it's new, but because he's getting away with it. And that's exactly why the system wants him gone. Not because he's dangerous in theory, but because he's starting to work in practice. And if you're paying attention, you know what happens to leaders like that. They don't just smear you. They don't just try to kill you. They try to erase the very idea of you. Because if you're allowed to exist, really exist, then others might start thinking they can too. And that's the thing. He's not larger than life. He's not ahead of his time. He is his time. This is where the old world cracks. This is where it starts. Here's the real deal. Ibrahim Traoré isn't some miracle. He's not magic. And he's not trying to be. That's exactly what makes him terrifying to the system. He's just normal. A normal guy who looked at the situation, decades of puppet governments, stolen resources, fake aid deals, French troops pretending to protect, while the country burns, and said, yeah, nah, we're not doing that anymore. That's the core of what Shahid Bolson was laying out. Traoré doesn't represent a dream. He represents clarity. And in this world, clarity is revolutionary. Just saying we deserve to govern ourselves without begging or borrowing or asking permission is enough to get you marked. What Bolson's saying, and I think he's right, is that Traoré's not trying to be exceptional. He's just doing what any sane leader should do. But because the bar has been set so low by years of corruption, coups, and handshakes with colonizers in suits, his basic decency looks radical. That's the trap. They keep Africa stuck in this loop where normal leadership gets treated like rebellion, where don't loot the country is seen as a threat, where protect your people is destabilizing. So when Traoré refuses to kneel, when he speaks without checking with Washington or Paris first, when he kicks out the French military and says, this land is ours, he's not being extreme. He's breaking the spell. And spells don't like to be broken. Especially not the ones that keep billions in poverty so a few men in London and DC can keep pretending they're still kings. Traoré is the glitch. The reminder that this whole thing, this illusion of Western order, of expert advisors, of peacekeeping missions and IMF loans, only works if no one calls it out. But he's calling it out. Loudly. And they don't know what to do with that. You know how people always say leaders like Sankara or Lumumba were ahead of their time? That phrase always rubbed me the wrong way. Sounds poetic, sure, but it's a lie. They weren't ahead. The time just wasn't allowed to move. That's what Bolson's really unpacking. These weren't prophets with visions too complex for the people. They were just logical men who knew what needed to be done. Kick out the parasites. Keep the wealth at home. Feed your people. Think independently. That's it. But when you do that in Africa, suddenly you're a radical. Suddenly you're too dangerous to live. It's not because the ideas are wild, it's because the system can't survive basic fairness. That's the part people miss. They weren't silenced because they dreamed too big. They were silenced because they made too much sense. And Traoré? He's walking that same line. But now there's cracks in the ceiling. The West doesn't have the grip it once did. They've run out of ways to dress up exploitation as charity. People are waking up even in Europe, even in the US, and asking, why are we still treating Africa like it's 1800? But here's the raw truth. When you freeze a people in time, you're not just stealing their gold or land. You're stealing their future. You're killing generations that haven't even been born yet. Because what they could have become never gets a chance to happen. You don't assassinate just one man. You assassinate everything that might have come from him. His vision, his policies, the kids who might have been inspired by him. Gone. That's why they feared leaders like Traoré, not because of who he is, but because of what he unlocks. Here's something wild. Africa's not stuck because it failed to develop. It's stuck because someone held it there. And yeah, I mean literally held it. With weapons, with debt, with smiling diplomats and fake development programs. You think coups and assassinations just happened? Nah, they were scheduled. They were strategic. Bolson said something that hit me hard. He said the West didn't just exploit Africa. They stopped a time. Like, while the rest of the world gets to move forward, change, adapt, whatever. Africa was locked in a version of the past where white hands still pull every lever. The 1960s for Lumumba? Sure. But for the West? That was just the 1760s, recycled. And when you freeze people in time, you're not just holding them back. You're erasing everything they might have become. Whole futures stolen in advance. That's a different kind of violence. A slow-motion genocide of possibility. This isn't metaphor. This is what happens when a generation grows up thinking poverty is normal, foreign soldiers are protection, and asking for dignity is dangerous. That's the world Traoré is trying to cut through. And man, it's not subtle. Every time he opens his mouth, every time he kicks out another foreign actor, or takes control of something that should have always belonged to his people, they panic. Because if he wins, even a little, the lie breaks. Okay, so here's the part that always makes people squirm. Traoré's not just African. He's not just a soldier. He's Muslim. And for some reason, that makes a lot of folks, especially the fake Pan-Africanists, real uncomfortable. Bolson didn't hold back here. He called it what it is, propaganda. People who scream unity, but are out here mentally dividing the continent based on who prays which way. Like being Muslim somehow cancels out your Africanness. It's nuts, but it's not accidental. That whole Pan-Africanism without Muslims thing, that was cooked up by the same intelligence agencies that overthrew your favorite heroes. Divide and rule 101. Make people pick sides they never needed to pick. Religion versus race. North Africa versus Sub-Sahara. As if the colonizer ever made that distinction. And here's what's even wilder. Some of the most clear-headed, no BS stand-up leaders in Africa right now, they are Muslims. Not the kind with slogans and flags and self-righteous speeches, the kind who actually live the values. Justice, dignity, defense of the oppressed. You know, Islam. Traoré's not out here taqwa signaling. He's not throwing Quranic quotes into every soundbite. But look at what he's doing. Fighting back against Western-funded death squads disguised as jihadists, building back local control, protecting his people. That's more Islamic than half the regimes out here calling themselves Islamic republics. So yeah, he's Muslim. And that matters. Not because it makes him better, but because it grounds him. Because it scares the hell out of those Western powers who thought they'd successfully corrupted and co-opted every Muslim leader from here to Jakarta. They're used to leaders who bow. This guy prays. You ever watch someone panic because they're losing control of the remote? That's the West right now. Scrambling, slipping, still loud, still dangerous, but not calling the shots like they used to. Bolson laid it out clean. What scares them isn't chaos, it's multipolarity. Different power centers, different alliances. A world where Washington doesn't decide who gets bombed, who gets paid, or who gets starved by sanctions. See, their whole system only works if they're the only game in town. IMF? Their tool? NATO? Their muscle? Media? Their narrative. But now, countries are looking elsewhere. Russia, Turkey, China, even just each other. And not because those places are perfect, but because begging your former colonizer to secure your freedom is straight up delusional. Traoré gets that. That's why he's not just switching presidents, he's flipping the board. It's not about picking new masters, it's about breaking the chokehold. That's what real sovereignty looks like. Not flags and anthems and photo ops, but economic independence, resource control, security that's not outsourced to people who used to own your ancestors. This new alignment, it's not a trend, it's survival. And it's the West's worst nightmare because once that grip loosens in Africa, it slips everywhere. They built their tower assuming the ground would never move. Now it's shaking. And Traoré? He's not trying to fix their system. He's lighting a match under it. Here's what people miss when they talk about assassination attempts, like it's some spy movie twist. It's not just about taking out Traoré, it's about deleting the possibility of him. Like Bolson said, when they kill a leader like Sankara or Lumumba, they're not just killing a man, they're killing an idea. An example. A path other people might follow, something that says, hey, we don't actually have to play by their rules. That's what terrifies them. The replication risk, that someone might look at Traoré and think, yeah, maybe we could do that here too. So they don't just try to shoot him, they smear him, sanction him, isolate him, twist the narrative. If that doesn't work, then yeah, they send someone in the night. 20 attempts, bro, 20. And he's still standing. Still talking like a free man in a world full of puppets. But the bigger fight? It's psychological. They want people to give up before they even start. That's why they keep repeating the same old line. They tried and failed, so don't bother. It's time-warped gaslighting. A form of warfare that runs across decades, across generations. If they can convince you that liberation is a fantasy, that dignity is childish, that fighting back is pointless, then they don't need to conquer you. You'll live conquered. Quietly, internally. That's what Traoré breaks. That inner colonization. That's why the whole machine is gunning for him. Alright, here's where it all lands. What's happening in Burkina Faso right now? That's not some local struggle, that's the front line. It's the pressure point where the old world is trying not to break, and the new one's trying to be born. Traoré isn't just fighting rebels in the desert. Every time he sits down with some Western diplomat, that's combat. They might wear suits and talk soft, but it's the same enemy. Same empire. Just a different uniform. And the thing is, people are starting to notice. From the Sahel to the slums to the suburbs, folks are looking over and thinking, wait, this guy's actually doing it? He's not perfect. He's not invincible. But he's real. And that alone is enough to make the system nervous. Because if one country gets loose, others might try. If one man refuses to kneel, others might rise. And if one small nation, poor and written off, can start clawing back its future, that means the rest of us have no excuse. So yeah, they're scared, and they should be. Because if their whole empire can be shaken by one guy in Burkina Faso, then maybe it wasn't that strong to begin with. That's why this matters. That's why this story needs to be told. Loud, clear, over and over again. Not for hype, not for clicks, but because you can't kill a signal once it spreads. And this is the signal.